Well, there have been all indications that the country is on a steady growth. And despite what the criticisms may be in country, it looks like some of the great indicators outside our borders have also been giving us some great accolades. We're talking about Ghana, some of the great policies introduced and ultimately getting the highlight internationally. And if you look at some of the indicators from the Africa Development Bank, just published about a week ago, apart from East Africa, look, West Africa has been nicking it in, and Ghana has been playing a great role. The growth figures have been good, but it's also because we've been able to manage the fiscals. The expenditure patterns have been lean to make sure that we achieve the growth that we want. But for managing information, it would also mean that you have to put everything into better perspective. And that's why we're having this great interaction with the Minister for Information. Kujo Ponkroma is here. Good morning.
Morning.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm great,
Been
bro.
a while.
Yeah, Charlie. How a good one. He's also the Member of Parliament for Ofuanse Ayerebi. And of course, we do know that he's going to vie for that position as well as the parliamentary candidate elect, even though he's the incumbent in April. But you were just back from a road show, yeah. And we'll talk about that very soon. But we just had an interaction with the head of our health desk, Fred Smith, who also gave highlights about what he had found out interacting with officials of the Kolebu Teaching Hospital, Ghana's main referral hospital, about the 2 suspected coronavirus cases that we have. Yeah. But what should be some of the main pointers we should look forward to on the part of government?
No, first of all, the government has put in place an elaborate mechanism for detection, for testing, for response to this corona virus. If you go to our airports, for example, I think just yesterday or a day earlier, the team had the opportunity to take the media around. There is a system for screening all persons who are coming in from places that are deemed to have an association with the virus. And then we've designated a number of health facilities for quarantine and for testing, even starting from the airport itself. The testing system at Noguchi, I think they've received their samples currently, so now they are in a position to actually test and make a determination. And the ancillary services, including even the security services, health professionals, etc., have also been on alert, and they have their core team that is responsible for this. I think what we need to do more is a lot of public education, and I noticed that you guys have started a bit of it here this morning. We intend to step it up as the weeks go by, so that people know what to look out for. And if you have a suspected case, like what is happening, a suspected case, they know where to go, how to get tested, what the quarantine processes are. So I think one of the things we should encourage is calm. It is good that people are aware of the initial symptoms, and therefore they know where to go and have an initial test and even the quarantine processes. We shouldn't get alarmed. I just got a call, just as I was walking into it, somebody said, hey, I hear the thing has come to Ghana, but no, that is not the case. There are persons who've reported with some symptoms. The process has picked them up. They have been initially tested, they are being quarantined, and then they'll go through the processes. So we should keep calm and just follow the protocols if we have any cause to worry.
But look, it was a great time. The news had hit the international waves before we even could get it. Bloomberg had been very instrumental in publishing how our roadshow had been, over subscription, 15 billion as it is. But we're looking for 3 billion. Yes. We got it, 300% and over times. But it also gives a certain pointers about what the signs are out there. What usually do you pick up when you speak to those who matter, who do the analysis, the observation, when we're talking about all that?
Very quickly, this is, I think, about the 8th time that Ghana has gone onto the international capital markets for a sovereign debt issuance. The first, was, I think, about in 2007 with President Kufuor, where we raised about $750 million. And a number of things happen. Depending on the state in which your economy is, 2 things are going to happen. Interest in your issuances may either be low or high. If your economy is functioning well and people have confidence that you can repay whatever you borrow, you will see a very high subscription to your issuance. Another matter is the price at which they are willing to charge you for the amount of money they are going to give you, what we call the yield or the coupon rate. And so again, if your economy is doing pretty well, you will notice that your yield or your coupon rates are lower, because then the risk premium is lower. So from 2007, as I mentioned, we've done about 7, this is about the 8th. But what is significant about this particular issuance is that we have done the longest dated tenor for an African country, a 41-year paper. Nobody's ever done it before. And for the investors who have put money behind this 41-year paper, essentially what they are saying is that they have a high level of confidence in Ghana's medium to long-term growth prospects. If you tie that with recently what happened with Moody's, for example, making a very bold statement that they could say that the outlook looks positive from stable. Remember, we were from negative, we came to stable, and now they say they see it looking positive because of what has been done over the period. And you couple that with the fact that the global capital markets are willing to put $15 billion on the table when Ghana says, I only want $3 billion. It tells you that there's an apt confidence in what we've done with the Ghanaian economy. Now, this $3 billion is part of the sovereign issuance that Ghana is doing for the 2020 budget. Remember, the 2020 budget has appropriation of about 98 billion cedis. So this 3 billion is coming in standard, mostly being chunked to support energy. We need to keep energy prices where they are. We need to keep energy stable, infrastructure. This year has been deemed as the year of roads. A lot of work already commenced across the country. You need a lot of liquidity to push that. And then also the growth driving initiatives that government has been embarking upon. You need to put some money in there. So what this means for the ordinary Ghanaian is that your energy can be stable, literally, and also in terms of pricing. It means that the infrastructure that you've been looking for and government has been committing to fund for contractors, you should expect that that is happening. And as that is happening as well, the ancillary jobs that come with it. Also the growth driving initiatives of government, those initiatives that bring growth, whether it's agriculture or education or all of those sectors, you should expect that the anchor funding is available for it, and it translates into its own jobs and incomes out there.
If you look at the growth figures, they've been consistently upward.
Yes.
Since 2017.
Yes.
And looking at the areas where we've had the growth until now, they've always been through the help of the extractive industry, so to speak. But now we want to concentrate more, have more investment. If you look at the last budget and infrastructure, and ultimately that could trickle to the other relevant sectors. How do we do that in consistent with the objectives that we have medium to long term, knowing that we have a policy objective of Ghana Beyond Aid?
So if you speak to the average young Ghanaian, his or her biggest desire is to have a job, to get some income so that he can afford a higher quality of life. Basic. How do you get jobs and incomes and higher quality of life? You must ensure that, first of all, your economy has a solid, firm foundation. It's not shaky, it's not rocky, you haven't chewed the meat down to the bone, you are not having the kind of difficulties that we're having prior to 2017, which is what we've succeeded in doing now, that the global markets are also responding to. Now, the second thing is that the government needs to raise and spend money on initiatives, particularly in the non-extractive sector, in the non-oil sector, that yield very high returns. So take agriculture, take manufacturing, take services. And if you look at the Ghana Statistical Service data, about 20 different economic activities. So what the government did was to fashion what we call flagship programs, each responding to each of these subsectors. And consistently, as the government pumps more money into these areas, what ends up happening is that they yield higher rates of growth than what was happening the previous year. So if previously we were doing growth of about 3.4% in 2016, because of a combination of what you are doing in agriculture and manufacturing and services, now you're yielding 8.1. The following year, you are yielding about 6.3, 2019 provisional about 6 point something, heading to 7. 2020, we are looking about 6.8. So now, yes, you are right, we are way above that 3.4, 3.5. We are looking into the 6s and the 7s on a consistent basis. When China was going to hit middle income to where it was going to go, you realize that we were growing at about 8% consistently for about a decade. That's what you need to do as a country if you really want to gallop, grow, absorb more people into the job bracket so that they make money. And the trick is that government needs to discipline itself in its budgetary allocation so that it will have money to spend on the real things that generate growth jobs and incomes for people. And that is the model that the Akufo-Addo administration, the economic management team under the leadership of Dr. Bawumia, Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta, that's a model that has been employed so far, and the results are trickling. What we need to do is to stay on this path for a decade or two, and you will see that the average Ghanaian will have the opportunity to get out of the poverty bracket into this bracket where he finds a job, he gets an income, he has a higher quality of life.
I do know that there's this great emphasis on making sure that we remain tight in the fiscals, yeah, and also get the expenditure patterns right. Yeah. And that has sent the positive signals out there. And that also means that we have a certain objective of emphasizing on the macros. But there are always development economists who seem to think that for developing countries, and we can name Professor Jeffrey Sachs, Professor Stiglitz, who would always say, even though the macros are important, it's also crucial that you do that hand in hand with the micros as well. How are we doing that, knowing that if we want to benchmark ours with maybe the ASEAN countries, we're also developing, for example, agriculture. We contributed about 90% from the highlight last year. So that what we churn out from planting for food and jobs is put into, apart from eco-juice, some other related variables or derivatives.
I was just reading, I think Joseph Stiglitz, People, Power and Profits, one of his latest books, where he talks heavily about the inequality gaps that are widening in many parts of the world, and why it is important, just like you're saying, not just to look at the macro numbers, but to see how it translates into micro benefits for people. Indeed, if you followed the budget debate in Parliament, my submission, for example, was exactly on that argument that, yes, the macros have been achieved. Let's stop let's stop debating whether or not the macros have gotten better, because it's obvious, it's gotten better. And focus on how do we translate that into micro benefits. And you're absolutely right. But what you need is a big plan. You need a big plan that is coherent, that ties in what you want to do in agriculture with what you want to do in industry and the services around it, the kind of infrastructure that is required to make all of this function. Thankfully, in 2017, this government laid that big plan in Parliament. I get disappointed when I realize a lot of people are not even paying attention to that plan, because every year's budget that we write is drawn out of that plan. It's the coordinated program of social and economic policies, very clear plan that builds the linkages. And it is in these linkages that you find that as you hit growth, let's say in agriculture, it ties in with what you are doing in industry, it ties in with what you are doing in services. But you can only do that when you have the funding so to do. So on the domestic market, you notice that we are raising domestic resources. Ghana Revenue Authority is gradually doing better. And on the international markets, like what has just happened, we are raising more longer dated instruments at cheaper prices. For example, Ghana has never sold a bond at under 6% yield. For the first time in the history of our country, we did the 7-year bond at, I think, 6.375. That is massive. Even the 41-year paper ended up being cheaper than the 31-year paper that was sold last year. So we are also now reducing the cost of borrowing. All of these things should translate into that fiscal space that you're talking about, so that you can spend on the big plan, which has the linkages. That is what will translate now into more jobs, more incomes, more growth for people across the country.
And the key drivers would be, if you look at the various sectors, will be apart from agriculture?
Well, so I mean, even under agriculture, you have a whole threshold from cereals and cocoa and livestock. Then you come to industry generally, where you have extractive, you have manufacturing, you have energy and related services. The president just inaugurated a huge solar energy system on his tour up north. All of that by next year will be translating into higher growth figures, even on the energy market. And then you come to services, which for many years has been doing pretty well. And for a developing economy like ours, you understand that services will come and take the lead. If you have energy that is available. So you remember in 2015, 2016, when you had Doomso, services were not doing that well because a lot of people could not even have energy to do hairdressing or welding and all of those things. And you can take them for granted. But today, if you have a government that has ensured that electricity is stable, and the pricing is relatively stable, inflation is down from about 15% to about 7%. That means the rate at which price of goods and services are going up is a bit lower. It makes it easier, relatively easier, for services to function and to achieve growth there and to absorb more people in that space. And I think that what we need to do is to stay on this trajectory a decade or two, and you see a lot more people benefiting from it.
If we have to look at it from the broader level, we have a debt to GDP ratio even though it's not increasing sharply because we've been able to manage the fiscal, so to speak. It also speaks volumes about how we're accruing, knowing that we have to improve the fundamentals of the economy.
Absolutely.
What timelines are we giving ourselves? Do you think we can give ourselves to be able to do that?
So the typical expression that the economists use is that in the medium term. In the medium term, 4 to 5 years. Long term, you're looking about 10, 15 plus. Here's what has happened. Sometimes I hear us talk about the CD denominated nominal debt stock. And you hear the politicians play this game, Akufo-Addo has borrowed 80 billion and you can't show. All that it means is that the CD denominated debt stock has maybe moved. If you read the summary of economic and financial data that the Bank of Ghana put out just last week, once the exchange rate is changing, you will see the CD denominated debt stock change. Once there are drawdowns on old facilities, you will see it change. But the most important thing you want to look out for is a debt sustainability analysis. And as I keep saying, if Quesitum of Multimedia Limited owes $1 million, it's not the same as you, Roland, owing $1 million. Because if you look at his asset size, he can pay off that $1 million maybe in a week. It may take you and your generation or my generation maybe a decade to pay. So you always look at the debt sustainability analysis. And one of the key benchmarks the world uses is the debt to GDP ratio. In 2016, Ghana's debt to GDP ratio was about 73%. That meant that if on a single day all our debtors said they were coming for their money, we have to mop up 73% of total productivity in the country before we can pay. And that is what puts you at the risk of debt distress. Today, we are under 60%. We are around 58% debt to GDP ratio. Sometimes they will say it's because of rebasing, etc. For me, that's an argument that doesn't wash. It is a fact that we are under 58%. What it means is that our debt is becoming increasingly sustainable. Do we want to use that as a basis to just borrow more and cross 60 and go far? No. The managers of the economy don't intend to do that. They intend to keep it somewhere within this under 60 horizon so that the risk of debt distress is not occasioned. When it is not occasioned, then in your fiscal tables, you will find some more space to spend on the real things you want to spend on. Else, if you go back to 70, 73, 74, like the previous administration took us to, what it means is that subsequent years' budgets, you have so much money you have to spend on debt servicing, and therefore so little space to spend on the real initiatives that will create jobs and give incomes to people. So medium term, we intend to stay within this horizon.
And somebody said that's why the Fiscal Responsibility Act is also important, because it puts us in a certain relative
Because
check.
we don't want to repeat what we've done in times past, where we go forward by 2 steps and then come back by 3 steps. And that's why now we've literally arrested it in law that no finance minister can go beyond 5% deficit on a year-to-year basis. And the global market responded to that very, 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 very impressively, because then they saw that there was real commitment to what we were doing.
Well, this session or this interaction is supposed to be as interactive as possible with our audience out there. So make sure you are getting interactive. Facebook Join News on TV, but also through our Join News on TV, our Twitter handle. We want you to give us more of your questions there, and we will relay many of them to the Minister for Information, Kwadwo Nkrumah. But let me just go on to the WhatsApp console platform. We have a good morning, Honorable. We most appreciate NACO for coming in for more for Nana Mutaro from Yendi. Now, NACO, it absorbs a chunk. As far as wages are, in terms of how much we spend on the allowances given these employees. Indeed, from the initial 600 million and a little over, we've increased it subsequently just before the billion mark. Is that sustainable?
It is sustainable once your national revenues are seeing an uptick like we're seeing now. All of these things that we are seeking to do is about mobilizing resources to spend on things that deliver benefit to our people. So to the extent that our national revenues keep going up, like is happening now, to the extent that we are working to close the tax to GDP gap. Remember, today Ghana has about, give or take, 13.5% tax to GDP ratio. OECD benchmark said that we should be doing at least about 20 by now. That is about 6 to 7% of GDP of nearly 400 billion cedis. That is not coming to the state. Can you imagine what we can do if, that's about 7% of 400 billion, that's about 32 billion, is coming to the state. You can do NACO even in 3 or 4 tranches. You can spend more money on roads and several other things out there. So to the extent that we are continuing to up national revenues, it should be something you can keep spending on. But the program is also designed to ensure that people are in for about 3 years and can exit. Indeed, already, Dr. Anyas and the team have commenced exercises to engage those who are beneficiaries on how they can be exited, to become entrepreneurs, to find jobs in the sectors where they are, or to become contractors of their services, even back to some of these organizations. And in so doing, keeping people out after 3 years and ensuring that you have revenues to pay, you can run a program like this. Every government all over the world has what you call big policies. And then under the big policies, you have programs that give life to the policies. So if you have a policy of youth training and employment, and NACO has a program to deliver that, it's a program that you must ensure you can fund on a regular basis and exit old beneficiaries so that new people can get in. And I think so far, despite some of the initial bottlenecks that came up, it has proven to be a successful, good program that we must ensure we continue funding. We must ensure that the beneficiaries get the training and that they are able to exit onto the world of work properly.
Uncle Gambier from Wamfie says, what is Eurobond? Is it not loan in its simplest language? So if Ghana is now boasting in her ability to contract loans, then what should the lender do? Does it mean that good governance has now been reduced to the ability to borrow in Ghana?
It's a good question. Let me quickly respond to that. Yes, a Eurobond is a sovereign loan. But Ghana is not boasting in its ability to borrow more. If you look at the numbers we are just talking about, Ghana's debt burden is coming down from 73% of GDP now to about 58%. Secondly, Ghana's borrowing is now cheaper. Now we are finding cheaper money to even repay some of the old expensive liabilities. I'll give you an example. In 2016, which was an election year just like ours, my very good friend, Mr. Sektekwe, went onto the Eurobond market to try and raise $750 million. He was not successful. They had to shut down the sale and come back because the macros were not in a good state and the investors were not interested. They went back later that same year to float the 750. Now, the 750 for the 5-year maturity was sold to us at 9.75%. Today, you are getting our 7-year paper at 6.35%. What does that mean? That means that if for nothing at all, you can pick the cheaper money and clear off the older debt, because the difference between 6.375 and 9.7 is over 300 basis points. That is over 3%. Now 3% multiplied by that 750 million, assuming you are servicing the coupons twice a year, it's a lot of money that you are spending on debt servicing, which you could have used to pay more of your NACO that you're asking me about this morning, which you could have used to do some more roads in Wemfie and those other places. So these are some of the strategies that you use to reduce your debt burden and to reduce the cost of borrowing. Why? So that you can create more space in your fiscal accounts and use your fiscal space, your resources that you have to fund the things that deliver, like I said earlier, growth, jobs, and incomes for people. That's all that this is about.
The banking sector cleanup. Of course, we've seen some prosecutions that have started, but biting hard on those who had been workers of these banks, have had 10, 5, or 20 years experiences in the banking sector, but now home. How do we synchronize what they feel, their state, with the communication out there that, oh, we've cleaned out the banks, ultimately we should see a better outlook 2, 3, 4 years down the line?
I always argue that the most important picture is the big picture. The most important picture is the big picture. What's the big picture? By 2016, the banking sector, as a result of very weak supervision, the financial services sector, was having a lot of difficulties. You recall President John Dramani Mahama in his last State of the Nation address says that because of poor supervision, they were having difficulties. They had to withdraw the licenses of about 70 financial institutions at that time, some of the lower tier financial institutions at that time. There were companies that went under at that time that could not get any support. Fast forward 2, 3 years down the line, the new administration receives advice from the Bank of Ghana that it is important to resolve this, and that it's going to cost about 15 billion initially from their estimates to resolve the sector. And that is done. Initially, you recall that the country could only afford to pay 10,000 cedis per head, so you still had a lot of people complain that I've not received my money. They upped it up to 20,000 cedis per head. Why? Because the revenue position and the resource position is improving in a manner that allows you to move in resources to close that one. By 23rd December, President Akufo-Addo instructed that everybody's money should be paid. And they are going through the process of validating and sorting out how they are going to complete everybody's payment. Now, there are persons, if my calculation is right, if the data I have is right, about 10,000 people who were working across these institutions, many of whom had already collapsed. About 10,000 people. Because of the actions of government through the Bank of Ghana, supported by the Ministry of Finance, you end up saving about 7,000 of those jobs. That's the data that's available. Of course, those 3,000 jobs that are lost are heartbreaking. These 3,000 people have families. They have wives and husbands and children and people who depend on them. So it is heartbreaking to see those 3,000 jobs go down the line. But what is the big picture? If 10,000 jobs were potentially being lost and the intervention has saved 7,000, it is comparatively better than having lost all those 10,000 jobs. That's A. B, the 3,000 who lost their jobs, if you have an opportunity to see this economy turning around, because this financial sector challenge was a cancer that could literally collapse the whole economy. It could literally collapse the economy. But if having ring-fenced 7,000 of those jobs in the sector, and sadly 3,000 people have lost jobs, and you have an economy that is growing, creating more opportunities in various sectors, as you and I have been talking about this morning, then we can look forward to transitioning these 3,000 people into some of the new opportunities that are coming up. Would it be in the first week or the second week or the third or fourth month? It will take some time. But comparatively, we are on a better path. And today, if you read the Monetary Policy Committee report from the Bank of Ghana just last week, the banking sector is more robust. Their profits are going up. They are beginning to increase lending to the private sector, which was going down because many of their books had gone into red. Now they are beginning to increase lending to the private sector. The central bank is now working with the banks to particularly deal with SME lending. Why? So that you can make some more money available to young people and people who want to do small and medium scale enterprises here in this country, but are not getting the necessary working capital, not the raw equity, but working capital so to do. And I imagine that many of these persons who may have lost jobs in this 3,000 bracket can therefore look to some of these opportunities that are being created on the other side.
A key realization in all this is to be able to mobilize domestic revenue. Yeah. And if you look at what the figures have been from the Revenue Authority over the last 2 or 3 weeks, it looks to have been that we've exceeded what the targets were the last year. Yeah. But ultimately, we had intended to broaden the tax net. A key or an integral aspect was supposed to make sure that everybody was tracked. We know where you live, we can know what you do, etc. The National Identification Authority was supposed to have been instrumental in all this, getting all of us identified, where we'll be located, etc. And the tax identification numbers, etc. We haven't been able to broaden that one, even though we're on it. It's been a bit slow. That's a negative, definitely.
I think we can all agree that, one, the strategy, which is to introduce digitization so that we can know everybody, find everybody, and compel everybody to pay their due, is a good strategy. So the whole idea of a digital property address system, the whole idea of ensuring that everybody has a tax identification number, and I hope all our colleagues here have tax identification numbers, so that we can ensure that you have an interoperable platform where it's easy to move monies up and down. All of these digital solutions coming together is a good thing. National ID, etc. Today we've registered over 7 million Ghanaians. That's the last number that I saw, over 7 million Ghanaians out of about 29 million. Now, it is clear that it is clear that we are on the right path. Have we completed it? No. Are we going quick enough? We probably can do better. So what do we do? What we need to do, in my view, is to demand a lot more from the persons at the forefront of this exercise. The Ghana Revenue Authority, the National Identification Authority. All of us need to demand a bit more from them, not go to the traditional argument of wish all of this away, that is not important, because they are the things that are going to transform the economy. One of the things that I very much support is the recent call that is coming up that the Ghana Revenue Authority should begin publishing annual revenue reports in detail.
You think that will do the trick?
It will help. Why? There are several persons in this country who are not paying. They are due. And we should get to a point where we can actually publish that data. Assuming there was data...
To get to know who is paying the property tax or not.
Assuming there was data of, let's say, all lawyers, all doctors, all teachers, all whatever, all shop owners, all properties. You are with me? And who has filed their tax returns for the year, and that data was available. I'm sure you'll pick it as a news item. Wouldn't you be shocked, for example, to know that half of lawyers may not be paying tax?
It will be interesting.
It will be interesting, and then we can hold ourselves.
If I was not paying, for example, or you were not
or
paying,
if I wasn't paying, it will be interesting. So we need to hold ourselves collectively accountable. I argue that the revenue problem should not be a problem of government only. It should be a collective problem. In this country, we spend time publishing an annual expenditure report, annual debt management report, and talk about it so much. The biggest one, the revenue, we don't pay much attention to. We treat it as a problem of government. Mr. Minister, you didn't meet your revenue targets. Why? But it's not just his problem. It is our collective problem. The way to do it is that we all must own the problem. How do we do it? And I think that the Ghana Revenue Authority, and I know the new commissioner and his team are doing a fantastic job, but we challenge them. Publish the annual revenue report in detail, sector by sector. Professional group.
That would not be enough. You need the various departments and agencies and those public officials put at the helm of these institutions to do their work, or you give them the sack.
That is one part of it. And today you
don't think it's a crucial.
It is. Today you notice that the leadership of Ghana Revenue Authority has all been changed.
Because of that.
The entire leadership.
Is it because of that?
Yes, because the administration was of the view that efficiency levels were low, and it's important to bring in people who could bring in some more efficiency. So that has happened.
So you replace the incompetent with the competent.
In addition, I'm saying that go a step further and publish the results so that we all see. And we can all hold ourselves accountable.
Mr. Nkrumah, we know good work. Outlook, you go out there, it's all looking good. Aesthetics, and we all do that. I'm a marketing person, so it helps. But in country, they feel, and the perception is that the government you belong to is not tackling corruption, especially corruption-related or suspected cases involving its own appointed officials. That's bad.
So what informs this view? That's the first question. And second question is, what is the real, true, unemotive, sustainable, that's the word you used earlier, answer to fighting corruption? The sustainable, unemotive answer to fighting corruption is about two or threefold. One, you build strong institutions. Where in this country, when in 1991, the framers of our constitution figured this out and put it in the constitution. We all pretend we don't know it until Barack Obama comes to say, build strong institutions. We're all clapping that, hey, Obama said something extraordinary. We know it. Build strong institutions. Apart from building strong institutions, let these institutions work, i.e., when there's an incident or a report or a suspicion, we must demand it of all ourselves that these reports must be made to these strong institutions we have built, and these institutions must be challenged to work.
You think that's what's going on?
That is what is going on and what we should encourage. And let me explain. For example, on President Akufo-Addo's watch, he says that, listen, when you have an incident of corruption or you have an allegation of corruption, I'm going to have it investigated by various bodies, whichever is appropriate. If it's, for example, corruption so properly suspected, like in the case of this Airbus matter, the Office of the Special Prosecutor, which is seized with a legal mandate to deal with corruption, and you see it's been referred to them to investigate the matter. If it is, let's say, general allegations that you need to properly sift out, is it a matter of corruption or stealing or is whatever, there's a police ID, etc., which you make available to them. So on his watch, not only is he better supporting the anti-corruption institutions like SHRAD, you can call Mr. Joe Whittal of SHRAD and ask him. Their financing and budgetary allocations have gone up. Nobody's interfering with their work. You can check from IOCO. Leadership has been changed. Financing is being made available. You can check from the Office of the Special Prosecutor. It didn't used to exist. It now exists. They are getting more resources. These institutions are being built. Now, what do we all have to do? Do we all go around just repeating, oh, corruption is going up, perception of corruption is going up? Or do we now also do our part, which is A, if you have evidence, we challenge you, don't come sit on the TV and just repeat it because you think it's political expedient.
That is, whip it up.
Go and make that report and back it with your evidence and let it be acted upon.
Okay.
And for example, when we see civil society organizations and media, etc., that appears to be, you know, whiffy-waffy on the subject of corruption, we call them out. For example, have you noticed that in this Airbus matter is, in my view, one of the biggest international level disgraces that Ghana is going through? Not even the Maybe and Johnson scandal. Check the amount of money in the Maybe and Johnson scandal. It doesn't come anywhere close to what happened or what the British and American and French courts are saying happened in this Airbus matter. The president, the government, discharged their obligations within the first 24 hours by referring the matter to the Office of the Special Prosecutor to act on it. I haven't heard, for example, civil society groups in this country even issue a joint statement. I'm sure you've seen them issue joint statements lately on various matters.
Well, here, we've spoken to anti-corruption bodies. Adam Sedano, for example, leads one of them.
I haven't heard them issue one of their joint statements that even express worry that the name of Ghana and Ghanaian government officials...
Is there no government that's supposed to act on it? And the president, rightly, has decided to allow the special prosecutor to do
its part. Where are the civil society
What do you
groups?
want them to do?
I expect them by now to be expressing worry. Even that.
And that will give you the signals
It will give me the signal that all of us are not just interested in talking about corruption and in so doing fueling a perception, but are interested in getting to the bottom. I don't like it when people are just accused of corruption. I prefer it when A, we get evidence, when B, we encourage the necessary bodies to deal with. I haven't heard the civil society group. For example, the investigative journalists, where are they? We have heard the British, the French, the American governments give so many clues about government official 1,
an intermediary.
Intermediary 5, and all of these persons. I am not seeing your investigative journalists and all of these persons with all your skill and craft.
But let's be fair.
No, I'm coming.
The Airbus scandal was a transaction between government and a public multinational.
Therefore?
Yeah, so it's a government to a multinational.
Therefore, investigative journalists, the media, civil society groups, nobody seems to think that it is important, beyond what government has done, to be going further and asking, who is this? How do we get disclosure? Nobody thinks it's important. Take the excavators.
Well, here at Multimedia, we've sent emails to Airbus.
You think that's enough?
No, we've even done more than that. We've sent emails to the Serious Fraud Office of the UK.
You think that is
for me, comprehensively, we've been able to do that.
The entire country haven't had our name. We were on the roadshow. You had investors asking.
They asked you?
You had investors asking questions about the coronavirus and about this Airbus matter, asking questions about, is this standard practice in Ghana? How does this affect business efficiency, doing business, etc.? It has an impact on the image of the country. And that is why all of us, regardless of whose ox is good, must be more interested. This morning I saw a post from, I think, Kweku Njubosa, who says anywhere else in the world, you will have media on a daily basis asking the persons who are thought to be most associated with it to answer for it. I like it when, for example, MPP persons are thought to be involved in excavators getting missing. And very quickly, it is reported to the police that they should investigate. And I'm expecting that same zeal with which we are all looking at it will be brought to bear. The civil society groups again, media again. How do we follow up on the institutions that we want to build?
You would notice that since the weekend, the Airbus scandal has been topical on all the major media platforms.
But topical is not what I'm talking about.
No, because...
As for topical, it can be topical even on social media.
And you have the experience.
You
know that to keep a subject and a media content topical, you would have gone beyond just the surface and try to investigate.
That is not what I'm talking about.
Unless perhaps you don't want to admit that.
No. I am not saying that nobody has spoken about it generally. I'm saying that we all need a more concerted effort in chasing the institutions to deliver, rather than whipping up the conversation that we think there's perception of corruption.
Was the Ministry of Defense contacted or government contacted in this investigation that was undertaken by the SFO of the UK as well as the courts?
My understanding is that what the SFO did was, having caught the Airbus officials who paid bribes to these persons, what they did was to literally get them to confess as a first step and find them. And then they are continuing with their investigations and possible prosecution of these intermediary 5s and GO1s, etc. But I'm saying, and please don't get me wrong, I'm saying that back home, all of us must be interested in chasing our institutions to get to the bottom of these matters. the substance of my
argument. And we've been to the defense ministry.
We need to do a bit more of that. We need to do a bit more of that.
Okay. What do you make of the speculation and subsequent confirmation by the minister, especially responsible for the environment, that we've had excavators that were seized from illegal miners and many of them missing?
I think, first of all, it's disappointing.
Is he going to be sacked?
Well, first step, it's disappointing. Second step, like I've said, we need to have it properly investigated and the substantive answers provided. He is a minister who literally led the entire exercise. And he has come up publicly to say that some of the excavators cannot be accounted for. He has gone further to report persons who, my understanding is his initial brief suggests are associated with it. He's gone further to report them to the Ghana Police Service. Question, so what are we all doing to encourage the police service to get to the bottom of this matter, so that if person A or B or C is found culpable, he is dealt with in accordance with the law? That is why I'm saying that all of us, instead of just drumming it up and flying it about, we all need to push our state institutions. Remember, we have agreed that fighting corruption is not going to be done by one macho man who ties people to the stakes and shoots them. And then a few years down the line, there are worse allegations of corruption about him. It's going to be done by building strong institutions, like what the administration is doing. And I think that is a bold and courageous thing that Professor Frimpong Boateng and his secretariat have done by reporting even associated persons who they believe are culpable to the police. Okay. How do we encourage the police to do a good investigation and get to the bottom of it? That's how you fight corruption.
And that's where we also go on to our Facebook page. So we have Jose asking, where are the excavators? And your response to what the minister should be and what will happen to him is what?
The question of where are the excavators is what the police CID is now working to uncover, because the minister has reported to the police CID that the persons in whose custody these things were, he believes are culpable in his inability to account for them. And like I've said, I think that all of us need to encourage the police CID to do that detailed job and give us all of those answers. And if persons are found culpable, regardless of whose socks is good, those persons must be held accountable.
Okay, we have Issa Mohammed Wari. Roland, kindly tell the Honorable to tell my beloved President Nana Addo Dankwa and our party executives not to impose members on our constituency.
Well, I think there's a big debate about, you know, the kind of selection exercise we are going to go through. And as much as possible, everybody expects it to be a competitive and open selection exercise. There are places where people have expressed worry that they feel they are being muscled out. But my understanding is that party leadership across the country will be abiding by the constitution of the party. I heard the General Secretary of the party speak quite clearly on the need to abide by the rules across the country.
Is somebody contesting you?
I am not aware of any. But if anybody feels at any point in time that he or she is being muscled, there are also processes in the party that allow you to, you know, raise it up at the higher levels.
We've noticed that in some constituency, it's been difficult even for would-be aspirants, prospective ones, to get access to the forms.
Yeah.
It hasn't happened to you at your constituency?
No. My constituency office is open. In fact, I'm hoping to pick up my forms early next week. I just came back from official assignment. I'm hoping to pick mine next week, and I hope I will not be, you know, stopped in any way from picking my forms. But like I'm saying, that there are review mechanisms in the party at the regional, at the national level, if you think you are having any of those difficulties.
All right. So let's quickly go through a round of them and then select one for him to respond to. Tizabala Obisidagati, please ask him when clearance would be ready for 2017 and 2018 batch of nurses and midwives. Please just hold on to that. And then we have Densa. This minister is abreast with issues. Ofansia Yorubi is proud of him. Let's also move up. We have John Asalabia. How much has he accumulated from the Galamsey deal, and has he given his party's balance to them? We also do have Kwame Prosper search his pockets very well, because I'm told he has some of the missing excavators with him. Okay, and then we have Burma Osei-Tutu from Otumfuo, the convener of Crossfire Ghana. I want to commend the president for the swift response to the Airbus saga. But let's quickly respond to the issues about the nurses and
I don't have a date yet on when the next batch of clearance will be given. I'm sure maybe when the finance minister comes back to town later tonight, we can get their timelines from him. But the general policy of government is to, first of all, improve the financial situation like what we've been discussing this morning, and to translate that into creating opportunity for the majority of our people, i.e. things like financial clearance. We've done over 50,000 health service workers in the year 2019 only. This year as well, we expect to do a bit more as the financial situation continues to improve. And as I've been discussing with you, both domestic resource mobilization and then on the liability side, if the numbers are coming in good, then you have the basis to do that extension and that level of financial clearance for people.
And the interactive is ongoing. Let me get on to my WhatsApp console before I get on to the lines as well. This one is from Ebusiapeni Buahin, Subua North. Is it in your constituency? Well, he wants to know, please ask Kojo, when is the Odan Ofuansi Road going to be fixed?
Well, he would notice, if he's indeed from my constituency, that there's a contractor on it now. There's a contractor on the road now. No. If you go to Achima Yobisina High School, you find the contractor's site all cleared up and ready. The contractor is on site currently. He's been on site, I think, since the beginning of this year. It's a road project that has been out there for many years. In 2016, the previous administration said they were fixing it, and anybody who goes there knows that that did not happen. Thankfully, currently it's been contracted out, and you will find on site right now the contractor on site. That in addition to a number of other projects we are doing in the district.
The committee, the Interministerial Committee on Illegal Mining, was doing great work. They had done a great launch. There were a number of actions that were undertaken by Operation Vanguard, the team that was supposed to do the arrest. The leader of the team says the prosecutions are just not fast enough. And that leads to a question of commitment, because you have a committee, you arrest, but you don't prosecute.
So, one, it could be a question of commitment, but I can safely tell you that it most likely is not a question of commitment, because the persons associated with the exercise generally are persons who were proud of the initial results that were coming in and are intent on delivering on that exercise. But the more reasonable issue that is happening here is a matter of coordination between those who are effecting these arrests and the kind of evidence they are gathering, and how they are coordinating with the prosecutorial authorities. Because even as happens in the high courts, etc., if the investigations and the evidence is not well put together, it makes it difficult for the prosecutor, often who was not even on ground when these things took place, to go to court and to make a strong case and to purport or to seek to succeed there. I think that's one area that moving forward we need to tighten that coordination, but it won't be for want of commitment.
Well, let's go to Tamale, where we have Richard. Richard, good morning.
Yeah, good morning.
Yeah, Richard, you have any question for the Minister for Information?
Oh, okay. It looks like you are doing a great job to help Mother Ghana. And I'm just want to ask the Minister that, yes, so the 40%, how is he doing? Yes, so the money has not been given to the Ghana Police Service. And I'm asking for you to ask the Minister for me that...
Which 40% are you referring to?
The 40% that has been given to the security service.
Oh, you mean the recent speculated upward adjustment?
And yes, so the Ghana Police Service has not been receiving their 40%. And so what is the government doing about that?
You know what he's talking about. I think he's talking about salary adjustments.
A salary discrepancy between some of the security services. First of all, I'm not sure that they are all on the same, threshold, even in terms of ranks, etc. But we'd have to look into it and have clarity whether or not they are also entitled.
It was speculated recently. There were a number of shots of adjusted pay slips, and for the military, it was massive compared to the police. And the police had some explanation based on some friends within the police service that I spoke to, who said if you look at the variance, was less 40%.
And I think it will be important to do the comparatives and be sure that, first of all, we are talking about the same entitlements at the same rank levels before we can make a determination of that.
Apia Doma, Apia, good morning.
Good morning.
What's your question to the Minister?
This BA financial scandal, bank God is love, care for humanity. I want to ask the minister when they are going to workforce or instruct the Bank of Ghana to release the funds. So the Bank of Ghana frees the accounts of care for humanity and God is love, taking the fan clubs and going against the financial whatever. And since that time, they haven't released the money to these fan clubs, them to pay we the customers of those fan clubs. And it was one of their high campaign messages that when they can, they'll make sure we those.
So your question is, when will they be paying that?
Hello.
So your question is, when will they be paying that or redeeming that promise?
When will government-led Bank of Ghana release our monies to these institutions so that they can pay us?
Very well, very well. Eben, Kofodia. Eben.
Good morning.
Morning.
Okay.
Yes, please. Your question to the minister. Your line is unclear.
I want to ask Honorable Minister to give us the essence of distance education, especially in the basic education. When they, at the end of the day, they won't be pushed. The most painful aspect of it is, at the end of the day, the last they wrote the licensure exams, they pass all right, but they have not been posted.
The essence of distance education officers.
I just think about certain things.
What's the essence of teachers going through distance
education?
education?
Is not paying.
And at the end of the day,
dear politicians, why?
Posting of distance education.
So let me get this clear. You're saying that teachers upgrade through distance education, but they don't get posted.
Yeah.
Or we have.
Some not even upgrade per se. Some go directly to do the distance. Yeah.
Oh, you mean they've gotten an upgrade in education? They have the education, their certification.
Yeah. But some even after secondary school, they can't go regular, so they have to go to the distance. It might be financial issues, so they go to the distance and acquire a diploma in basic education.
Eben, do I get the understanding that you're saying that officials at the ministry say that if you acquired your certificate through distance education, you will not be posted? Is that it? No, I wanted some clarity on that.
But I think I can,
you wanted to
generally give a response to this. When it comes to recruitment into the public services, we have introduced a major change. At first, people could be recruited and posted into the public services when even the finance ministry and the central government was not aware where to find money to pay them. So they will go in a year or two, they have arrears that has not been received. And then you remember the government at the time said, no matter how many years you've been in, you will only be paid 3 months. I believe all our viewers and our...
There's a question like that. So what happened to them?
So the new approach that we use now is that there must be financial clearance before you are posted. If I do a budget that says that I've only got 98 billion cedis to spend for the year because of what we're talking about, people not paying their revenues, etc., okay, and therefore I can only afford to pick 1,000 or 2,000, I must be clear to give that 1,000 or 2,000 financial clearance before we recruit them. So that policy has changed. That is why you will find that there are people who are hoping and wishing that they will get in today. But if you look at the sheer size of the backlog, where from about 2014 coming down, we're not recruiting in many of these services. Even if you've recruited, like in the case of health, 50,000, you will still find, and this is just an example, some 10,000 out there who are waiting to be given clearance so that they are recruited. Those 10,000 are Ghanaians who, when they speak, we all feel that pain. But we have to go through the process of getting them the financial clearance before they are recruited. So it's not a matter of there's no use for distance learning because maybe he hasn't gotten posted, etc. It's a process that we have to go through. Also, this question about some financial institutions in the Brong-Ahafo region. If I heard him right, I heard him...
during the campaign, there was a promise.
Who made that promise? Do you have the video of who made that promise?
MPP
got to play it.
Campaigners.
Let's not just say it. Let's play it. Play who made that promise. Because if I heard him right, he was talking about fund clubs. Did you hear him say fund clubs?
There were some financial fund clubs involved in that.
But fund clubs are not institutions that are regulated by the Bank of Ghana. Just like has happened in, I think, the case of Men's Gold. It's not an institution regulated by the Bank of Ghana. The Bank of Ghana cannot come in there and purport to pay for fan club members who've contributed their money. And if indeed anybody made that as a manifesto promise or the presidential candidate or the vice presidential candidate made that, I think we can all play it and then hold that person accountable.
All right, now let's go to Danny. Danny, you're calling from Boku. Danny?
Yes, please.
Yeah, you're our last caller. Please, your comment or your question to the Minister for Information.
Yes. Yes, please. Can you pass my name?
Please go ahead.
Yes. I want to thank the Honorable Minister so much for his excellent clarity and explanations. My question is,
okay. All right. So there's an ongoing brouhaha over the decision by the Electoral Commission to compile a voters register.
Yes.
It's raised enormous comments, not only from the main opposition party and the smaller groupings, but civil society. They signed a whole statement, 18 of
One of that statements I'm hoping will be signed in the case of the Evers. By the way, let's go forward.
You have said?
Yeah.
Okay. But one of the key arguments is about time, the other is about cost, relatedly. Even, of course, we've had the position also taken by the Electoral Commission.
I think that all of those concerns are valid. Concerns about cost, concerns about time, concerns about whether or not it's appropriate. All of those concerns are valid. And the responses from the EC are also valid. Let us not forget that we are running a country in which, as we started this morning, we think that we need to build strong institutions, including the independent constitutional bodies like the Electoral Commission. So if we all have views, it's good to express it. What the government, for example, must do is to ensure that people have a framework within which they can express those views without fear or favor. So when people want to go on demonstration, we ensure that they get the necessary security protection. Police doesn't go and beat and literally maim people when they want to go out there to demonstrate about the new register, which is what was happening around 2015 thereabout. Government is discharging its obligation. If the EC says that it requires some funding to do its job, our job as a government is to ensure that that funding is made available, because we cannot dictate to the Electoral Commission. So let the opposition and its supporting parties make their case. They are valid cases. Let those who support the exercise make their case. Let the eminent group make their case. But in the end, the independent constitutional body called the Electoral Commission, we will all speak to them that, listen, you have to be careful. You don't put us in any situation that will make the December 2020 elections difficult for Ghana as a country. But what you deem fit is what you must do. I think that's how we got to
what they deem fit and they want to do is to compile, despite all these concerns. And you say these concerns are valid.
Yes, but these concerns are valid to be expressed to them. They would listen to it and make a determination whether they agree or disagree with them. None of us can. I can't force the EC to do. If the EC, for example, says that it will open a polling station in one particular village in my constituency, or not open a polling station, if I believe that they are wrong in law, or they are wrongly exercising their power, I go to court to get the court to compel them. I cannot compel them. So let us all make our submissions to the Electoral Commission. And I think former President John Dramani Mahama in 2016 articulated this very well. I don't know why his position has changed now, but he articulated it very well, that let everybody make their point and let the EC decide. I don't know why now he desires to encourage his party to go and occupy the offices of the EC and literally force the EC to do what they desire.
He did what?
Now, it appears he's encouraging his party to literally occupy the offices.
It appears, yes. So you are speculating.
Well, no, I don't have evidence that he's doing that. Okay. But it is his party. He's the leader of the party.
But let me just apprise you of what Imani Ghana or Imani Africa puts forward. It says the Electoral Commission of Ghana wants to rip out a system worth $60 million, of which value at least $40 million has been accumulated since 2016, meaning that they've spent in progressively updating either the register or the systems, etc. Imani Africa. Imani. And spend $150 million in doing their new one, constructing a whole new system, having a good backup data center, compiling.
But that is their view. It is not the view of the review bench of the Supreme Court. They could be wrong. Their view is not sacrosanct.
Are you saying civil society view is irrelevant?
I haven't said that. I choose my words very carefully. I've never said, civil. I said they could be wrong. That's Imani's view. It's very different from, or it is, like the view that may be expressed by, which one? ASEPA or about, let my vote count alliance, all these groups.
Or IEA.
Anybody can express a view. It does not take away the constitutional powers of the Electoral Commission, having listened to everybody in making a determination. I'm happy to hear everybody express their view. And I think that we should encourage that. That's the job of government, to ensure that we have a framework where everybody can express their view. But we should at the same time also make the point that nobody should think that his view or her view can now be forced on the Electoral Commission. That is what we must stay away from. That's how we build strong institutions. So let us all express our views, but let the EC decide at the end of the day.
The EC is going ahead.
Let them decide. If they decide to change their mind, that's fine. If they decide to go ahead, that's fine.
All right. Thank you. It's been a great interaction. I have enjoyed it.
Thank you.
And I hope that all of you have too. And thank you for the messages on WhatsApp. We've had all the messages coming through, and on Facebook, Joy News on TV, through our Twitter handle, Joy News on TV. We've had all views taken in strongly, and the questions also, some of them relate to the Minister for Information and Member of Parliament for Ofuanse Ayorebi Kojo Oponkroma. It's been a delight. But we have to move on. We also do know, as the world scrambles to minimize the adverse impact of climate change, there are many other related things that need to be done as far as quarry and other industries are concerned on nature. Now, a mining company in Kenya has done remarkably well by turning one of its fallow concessions into a safe sanctuary for plants and animals. Now, this is in sharp contrast with Ghana, where some mining firms abandoned mine outpits and degraded forests after their operations. Well, we have to take a look at this, but before we do that, we have to go for a short break. When we come back, we'll bring you more details.